Hey fellow YouTubers and subscribers, Dirty D here at Dirty D's RC. Winter's here now, so I haven't been shooting too many videos, but I'm gonna do a little small series of videos. I'm gonna do it in series just to keep the videos from being too long. Try to keep them at least between 5 and 10 minutes. I figured the first part I would explain the setup on my truck and various mods I've done and reasons why I've done it that way. So let's move on to that. Here's my low-C mini rock crawler. It has been fairly heavily modified. There's not too many stock parts left on this truck. There is still some. But as a mini rock crawler, it's not really a true scale truck. They kind of got these weird little cheater frames, I call them. It's not really actually scale. So it is a specifically built crawler. But when I first got this truck, I mean, it crawled all right off the bat, but it wasn't very realistic. So first thing you can notice probably is that I got my shocks set for basically half droop. Now the reason being for that is so that I got an equal amount of dropout as I do compression. So what happens there is it allows this wheel to drop down without taking all the weight of the vehicle with it, like what happens when you have it when the shocks are set up to stand fully tall with no dropout. What happens is it tips your center of gravity up this way, and all the weight is now on this tire. So when you have a half droop, what happens is this tire is allowed to drop out, but all the center of gravity still stays over these three tires here. Therefore, all the weight is still up here and not being tipped out over the edge. Now, the original, all the control arm linkage, they were all straight arms. Well, actually, the upper on this particular model had a 3-link or a 3-point contact wishbone. So it was just one pivot here and then two pickup points here, and it just made the truck very, very unstable. The axles would just go side to side way too easily, and I found it was contributing to it tipping over and instability on side inclinations. So I went back to a proper 4-point pickup linkage at the top, and man, what a huge difference, because now the suspension acts like tendons or ligaments you would have in your leg or your arm, whereas before it would just flop all over the place on that one pivot point. So yeah, that was one thing that had to go. I went back to a proper 4-point pickup, which I really like. And then of course I've added in these bent arms. These are upgraded low-C arms that normally would go down on the bottom, and these are three racing arms with a 60-40 bend. The original original setup came with a square box style front and back. You can actually see the old spot where the arms went in. So I did the bow tie style on the back because I like that geometry much better for the back, and I'll get to explaining why in a minute. The front geometry, I wanted the box style, which means it basically goes straight out. You get a box in here. This, you get a bow tie between the two upper and lower link that connect here, and then this one flares this way, this one flares this way. Anyways, we'll get to that in a minute. I wanted to keep the front box shape essentially because for front end and steering stability. I don't know if you can see in there, hopefully you can. But also I have my shocks wider at the top than I do the back. And like I said, there's a reasoning for all that. Another thing I have done is the shocks used to sit in here on the inside of the connecting point here. I moved them out closer to the wheel, again for widening my stance of the action of the shock and making the action of the shock closer to the wheel. Reasoning for that is, some of you may have noticed, I have wheel widener spacers on my truck. There's a reason for that too. On that point as well, some of you may have noticed that the front wheels appear to be a little bit wider track than the back. The reason for that being is that this truck is mainly set up to be front wheel drive with rear wheel drive assist, meaning that it pulls itself up more than it pushes itself up. So the other reason for wide wheel spacing is it kind of gives me like an overthrow bite, and it makes the radius turn out wider from the pivot point. Like I say, that kind of gives me an overbite and stability on the inside. And so the reason why the back is a little narrower, which I actually would like it to have wider wheel spacers. I'd like to take these out to 10. But the other reason for that is I know if my front tires go through, my rear tires are going to follow with very little problems of hanging up or getting hung up when I don't want them to. So back to the bow tie setup in the rear here and the square being in the front. Now, the reason why I've done it that way, with the shocks mounted narrower at the top of the back and wider at the front, the reasoning for that being is I want the rear to twist more in than the front does first before the front starts to articulate. Reason being is when I'm on the surface, it allows the rear to drop into certain holes as you're trying to climb up, and not affect its ability to pull itself up out of those holes. So like I say, basically the rear just follows the front, and that allows me to pay attention to the front of what's happening with the vehicle, i.e. where to drop in, my steering effect. Again, on descents, it allows me more stability on the front when the rear can just kind of move around as it likes. It doesn't affect as much as it would if they were both box. So that's the reason why I have bow ties set up on the back and box setup on the front. For my shock setup, I like to run super soft springs. I have a 70 mil super soft spring on the bottom, partnered with a 90 mil super soft spring on the top. Now, this spring isn't actually 90 mils, and this spring actually isn't 70 mils either. It's just that because this is a dual rate spring setup, it was kind of by accident. When I first ordered the first spring set, I ended up ordering the 90 mils, which is basically 2 of these springs together would equal 90 mils plus the spacer. So I ended up buying those by accident, and then I ended up finally getting the proper 70 mil ones, and it actually kind of works better this way than having 2 70 mils together, because this 71 mil now kind of becomes like an active preload spring, and this spring accompanies the travel. So normally these shocks are probably totally out of oil right now. I had them with fairly heavy oil. I think it was 35, 35, 35, 40. 40 on the torque side to prevent torque twist. But I want to go heavier oil yet again, because what I want is super quick compression but very slow rebound. And right now, rebound is a little quicker than I would like. The compression is great quickness, but the rebound, I would like it to be slowed down a lot more. Reason for that being is it basically it allows the one wheel to generally move independently without picking up any of the other 3 wheels off the ground, to do with the way that the springs and the shocks are set up. This allows for way more stability of keeping your center of gravity where you want it. Like, I can pretty much pick this whole truck up. So, I mean, that allows you to approach all kinds of crazy angles and descents, basically with the way this whole setup is. Next thing, I added these 2 batteries, not because I need extra runtime or more power. I will have them hooked up in parallel one day. That'll make it extra long runtime. This truck can already run like 2 or 3 hours on just one battery. But anyways, I've dual batteried on the side like this to create suspended weight over the suspension. The reason for that being is so that there's always weight pushing down against the wheel so that you're getting your maximum amount of grip. Also, it used to have the battery up top. With this, the batteries are sitting down much lower. You're getting a much lower center of gravity. So this truck without the camera is just under 4 pounds. The truck with the camera is just up over 4 pounds. So for a Mini, that's a pretty heavy truck. There is plans into the future for a true ladder frame for this truck. It's gonna vary a little bit in the geometry, but not too much. The shocks are gonna stand up a little more vertical, but not totally vertical, but just a little more than that. And I'm hoping to widen the links and the stance at the bottom again for the shocks by making my own axle brace unit out of some aluminum. Yeah, so ladder frame, axle braces, and a roll cage. And then I can work on putting in an interior and then put on the lights. And maybe a spare tire depending how the weight balance is in the back. And she'll be officially at that point an actual true scale rock crawler truck, but that's still gonna be in the works. Hopefully over the winter I can make this happen. Yeah, I'll be able to finally actually make this truck look like a truck and act like a truck. And I predict I won't lose any capability of climbing any part of my course, even with the ladder frame and the slightly reduced articulation. This truck is all about getting traction to the ground at all angles. So yeah, that being said, I hope I've explained enough about the setup and helps you guys understand why I've set it up this way for the kind of crawling that I do. Alrighty, thank you much, and stay tuned for part 2. We're gonna head out onto the rocks, and I'm gonna start explaining different descent tips and trips and driving skills that I use when I'm descending down hills. Alright, thank you very much.